Thank you, everyone, for coming to Clubby in the rain this time instead of snow. So, gosh, come next month. It'll be nice, I promise. I think I've met everybody, but my name is Chum Struve, and I've been running Clubby St. Paul here now for 4 years. And I'm very appreciative of this opportunity to bring events and panelists and different topics to small business owners and all of you. So the upcoming events are on our website, which is clubby.com, and also on our meetup. And you will also get an email from me and be on my list. And we're having in Minneapolis, at the Minneapolis Club, on April 29th, we're having key employees recruiting, assessing, and retaining in a competitive environment. Also at the Minneapolis Club, which is Rick Brimacombe, the founder of Clubby, runs that group. May 2nd, we're having functional food entrepreneurs, tales, trials, and tribulations. And then we're back here in St. Paul, May 17th, Does Culture Eat Strategy for Breakfast? And we'll have a panel for that. Our luncheons are sponsored by some very generous companies, the University Club, Olson Thielen CPAs, Schwegman, Lundberg, and Wisner, IP attorneys for tech companies, the Irish Titan, which is an e-commerce digital agency, and we have Shane here representing the Irish Titan back there in the blue, the Irishman himself, Sunbelt Business Brokers, and my company, Legal Shield, providing employee benefits in identity theft and legal protection. We have about 40 minutes, so with that, I really am excited to bring this topic to you. And before we have the speakers, the panelists introduce themselves, I just want to remind you that I do host these events and these topics so that you can ask your questions. I definitely have questions for you, but always please chime in with anything that applies to you. I'm sure someone else in the audience may be thinking the same thing. So with that, we're going to get started with our panelists, and we'll have them just do a brief introduction of their background. And we'll start with you, Joel. Okay.
My name is Joel Swanson, and I am a certified implementer of this magic thing that we call EOS. So I've been in operations and consulting my whole career. I've been doing EOS specifically for 5 years. And so my role is I work with my clients as an outside teacher, facilitator, and coach to help them figure out how EOS works, teach them the system, coach them along the way, and then set them up to do it on their own.
Thanks, Joel. My name is Justin Bogonic, and I am the creative director and founder of Mercury Creative Group, and we're an organization that helps our organizations harness the power of their brand to drive business growth. And I lead my teams to help connect leadership and staff, or lots of times reconnect them to their brand, and then work with staff to bring clarity to the organization and alignment from within. And then we get to do the fun stuff and put together the creative and marketing tools to connect the message to the ideal audience to help them drive growth and drive revenue.
Hi, I'm Roger Sherping, and I like to say that I was an integrator before the book was written. I started my career as a CPA, controller, and CFO, and then I got some marketing experience at Deluxe Check, where I managed consumer checking products. And then I started about a 20-year run of managing small companies. A lot of them were manufacturing companies. A lot of them were very troubled companies, so I got very good at getting companies back on their feet. The biggest company I managed, if you're any outdoors people, you might have heard of Clam Outdoors. I was president there. In all these jobs, I would listen to the owner of the business to hear what the goals were and start to implement what we needed to do to reach those goals. And then one day I read Traction, and I got to the part about integrator, and I said, that's it, that's me, that's what I've been doing. I've been going into these small companies, listening to the owner and making it happen. So today I still do the same thing, but I do it fractionally with small companies with less than 30 employees that cannot afford a full-time integrator.
Great. So we're going to go back to Joel Swanson, and there's a variety of level of knowledge of EOS traction here. So I wanted to give each of them an opportunity to give us an overview before we got into the questions. So we'll go ahead and start with Joel.
Sure. So at its core, EOS is a system for managing human energy, and it stands for the Entrepreneurial Operating System. It tends to be called Traction because that's the name of the first book that you've got in front of you. So if you're out in the market, people say EOS and people say Traction, both kind of interchangeably. And really the goal is to help companies arrive at three different things that we call vision, traction, and healthy. So vision, meaning first getting the leaders of the organization 100% on the same page in terms of where our organization is going, and then more importantly, how are we actually going to get there? And then the traction component is all about discipline and accountability. So teaching leaders to be people who can really master execution so that they can actually achieve the vision of the company. And then healthy, meaning helping the leaders of an organization really advance as a functional and cohesive team, because oftentimes you get leaders together and they just don't function that well as a team. And then from there, as goes leadership team, it starts there, but then it permeates through the rest of the organization. So when it's done, we're at a place where everybody in the entire organization is crystal clear on the vision and is disciplined and accountable in the way that they execute toward that vision. And then teams at all levels of the organization are advancing in that functional, healthy, cohesive way. So there are 6 key components of EOS, and one of the fundamental beliefs is that everything that's not working in your business is a deficiency in one of these 6 key components. And so those components are the vision component and the people component, data, issues in terms of the way that we solve issues, process, and then traction is the one that's about execution. So everything we do is about strengthening those 6 components.
So my role today is the visionary. So I'm going to sort of talk about my experience because we just recently implemented EOS. So I have a lot to share. I had to bring notes so I could run you all through this. So I'm sure you'll have a lot of fun questions for me later on where we're at and what we've learned. I learned of EOS probably about 9-10 years ago and read the book and was very intrigued, but realized as a company of 4 people, we were too small to actually implement a lot of their tools. But what I did do is implement their core values and the people analyzer just for my people on staff, but I also analyzed all of my contractors that we used as well. And we were implementing a new project management system at the time, so we used the L10 and IDS process, which the IDS at the time worked really well to sort of solve a lot of the issues that we're having with our project management software. In 2016 through the end of last year, we experienced some really nice growth. We added 2 employees. With that came a lot of tripping over each other. We made mistakes. We weren't delivering as I would like us to have been delivering, and we were hearing that from our customers. And I have a business coach, Cliff Allen, which some of you may know, and him and I have worked very closely over the years, and he introduced me to Mark Francis, and we had a glass of wine, and we talked about a lot of my trials and tribulations and issues with Cliff, and we kicked off in middle of December to self-implement with my coach, Cliff, and through what we do by helping other organizations rebrand and uncover their unique value and get out into the marketplace, I had a lot of those tools already in place for my company, so we got our VTO put together pretty quickly. We had it in a half day. So that was one of the first things that we did. Went back through the people analyzer. We built our accountability chart, which was super hard for me to take now 8 people and define what their role is supposed to be or what I'd like it to be, yet we all wear multiple hats. Mark can share, I think I had numerous calls with him and evenings and weekends like pulling my hair out because our actual accountability chart was 3.5 feet wide. So we had a lot of layers. It's since been cleaned up. I'll have to tell you, we learned a lot. We also, the scorecard, so going to the data side. So first of all, the vision side is the vision traction organizer. So that was the first thing that we did. The people, that's the people analyzer. It's called GWC, get it, want it, have the capacity to do it. And that's what we use to analyze our people. And there's a fun term in EOS called right people, right seats, RPRS. So I don't have all the right people in the right seats still, and I think that's an ongoing process that you run into with any organization. Our issues, we have our issues list, we IDS them. That's identify, discuss, and solve with your team. Process documentation, I think we're ahead of the game with this, and we've documented most all of our processes. We're about 95% of the way. Q2 for us right now is all about executing those processes and holding our team accountable for their role. Staying in your lane, don't swim into the other lane. Traction is the meeting pulse, or in the traction element is our meeting pulse. So that's our weekly level 10s and going over our rocks. In reflection, I'm probably going to go a little bit longer, but I think this is important for all of you. We had to develop a weekly scorecard, super difficult to find out what are these numbers that we all have to be accountable for each week, and then our quarterly rocks. We've had too many rocks. We were too aggressive, and too many of those rocks were in my plate. We have since changed that with our quarterly. We have 4 rocks that we're going to move, and I love what we've done, and I only own one of them. Our weekly L10s, we added our status meeting, and it got to be too long. So our full Mondays were leadership team was we would IDS, and then we would move into a status meeting. So we'd go through all of our projects, but then we would also IDS with the full team. It got to be too much, and we were actually losing productivity. So now for Q2, have split that up. We're going to have our L10s on Monday, or our status meetings on Mondays, and L10s on Friday. And we also had everybody in our L10s, and we quickly reduced that down to just 4 people, because I quickly realized even in a small team, they don't all have the leadership capacity that we needed to think and solve. Team realization, and then looking back, I realized I don't have the team that I thought I have, and we're working through that with them. We've since gone through everybody's accountability chart, their roles and expectations. We've refined them. Mark and I have met with them individually, so they have a clear understanding of what their role and responsibility is and what our weekly expectations are with the system. And that was probably the biggest win for me, is to be able to have somebody on my side hear from my super wonderful, talented staff what their needs were and what their misunderstandings were of their role, and to find clarity. And that's what we do, is bring brand clarity and alignment to organizations. I'm getting it for my own company within my staff. So that was a huge win. The integrator and visionary relationship. I am the idea guy. I have too many ideas. I change a lot, and I think it took a solid 3 months for Mark and I to get to know each other, him to get to know me to get to know Mark, and especially him to get to know my team and our industry and the challenges that we have as a small organization. And just every day was different for everybody. The personalities, there was a lot of flux with all of this change. So, but I feel really good where we're at after 3 months. But I think what is important, and these guys will talk about this even more, is how we had to be lockstep. Even if I didn't agree with something that Mark had to say, I had to stand behind it, and we could talk about it behind doors, just so we were in alignment. And that was a big thing. And we actually we were off in one of our meetings, and one of our staff members kind of called us out a little bit, and that was a little bumpy. And I remember chatting after, he's like, "Ooh, I didn't back you up on that one." So that was a really good learning lesson for me. All right, I think the win that we have right now is the alignment with our team. In 3 months, we have shaken it up a little bit, but there's a change in the ownership of what they're doing and the collaboration that's happening right now, and just talking to each other. We're a virtual company. That's another challenge. So just putting the structure in there was extremely beneficial. And I don't think any team or anyone in EOS is doing it, but the ability to solve problems on a weekly basis puts you far above so many other organizations to just hit pause and figure out why are we struggling with this, and to solve it together. Because when that team solves it and they put the solution together and start implementing it, that's a big win as a leader and an owner. Our core processes, like I said, are 95% in place, and this quarter our Q2 mantra is execute, execute, execute. So I'm sure you'll have plenty more questions. I'm happy to ask.
I wonder if we should just take a quick pulse about who is new to EOS. Anybody new? I kind of am. And who has already implemented it? Okay, and then I know one person who's going to implement it already. Okay, so if that helps you a little bit in terms of who we have in the audience, okay, go ahead.
So my first day that I worked as a fractional integrator with a small company, I talked to the visionary and he goes, you know what, I'm a trapped visionary. And I said, okay, what does that mean? He said, I would love to be on our industry board and write for our industry publication. I would love to build out our sales team, and I would love to work on our corporate culture. But do you know what I spend all my time doing? Working in QuickBooks. So I said, okay, I think I see how I can help this guy. So integrator sounds a lot like implementer, and believe me, we use the terms incorrectly a lot too. But you've heard Joel say that they're an outside coach for the business, teaching them how to use EOS. The integrator is an employee within the business, and you heard from Justin how Mark is working as his integrator. You've also heard Justin talk about the visionary and his big picture view and all the things he wants to get done. So he's got this 50,000-foot view. How does that get all the way down to being implemented? How does it get all the way down to the ground? Well, the skills that make a great visionary are being able to see the future and where the industry is going and things like that. Not necessarily, that doesn't necessarily mean they're so good at managing details, at tracking what's happening, creating detailed action plans, holding people accountable. I had a visionary tell me once, I can't even hold myself accountable. How do I hold other people accountable? So you've probably all heard of Walt Disney, Steve Jobs, and Henry Ford, but how about Roy Disney, Steve Wozniak, or Jim Cousins? None of those three visionaries in that first group would have been successful without their integrators. So the first job of the integrator is to listen to someone like Justin and figure out, well, what is the vision? Where are we going? Where do you want this company to go? It could be sales, it could be market share, it could be expansion, it could be products, whatever it is. Your first job is to understand what the vision is. Then the second job is to figure out how to make that vision a reality by working with the team, creating the action plan that'll make it happen, managing resources, managing the day-to-day activities and that sort of thing. These are all things that sometimes the visionary just doesn't have that skill set, but sometimes they do have it and they just don't want to do it. I mean, it just doesn't get them up in the morning. They'd rather do the other things. So integrators then are very vital to the organization. They integrate the major functions of the business. They manage the day-to-day. They manage the people and hold them accountable. The integrator they're the glue that holds it together. The people, the processes, the events, the priorities, and the systems, everything about the company. What I really like is the integrator creates focus, accountability, and alignment. Or real simply, integrators just get stuff done. And you might hear them referred to by the title of general manager or COO or ops manager or something like that. So integrators are actually very hard to find. They say that only about 2% of the population has the skills to be an integrator because of the broad skills that are required and the experience. I mean, you have to have actual senior level experience in sales and marketing and operations and finance. I say that as you're executing this role, leading this team, you have to be able to go toe-to-toe with the VP of sales, the VP of ops, and the CFO. So it's an unusual skill set, and you have to have previous P&L experience because you really have to have that sort of been there, done that quality. You have to have been through these different things before. The other interesting statistic is that visionaries actually outnumber integrators by 6 to 1. So there aren't very many of us. So it makes it even harder for the integrator to find that unique match that they need to be successful. So back to my first visionary. Brent told me he was trapped, so I had to figure out how to untrap him. So the first thing is I've trained a lot of controllers in my life. So I found somebody on the staff who had the ability to take some of that over. So I trained her on how to use QuickBooks, and I taught her the basics of accounting and the basics of cash flow. So we were able to take all of that off Brent's plate, so he didn't have to do that anymore. And then in the integrator role, I took over the management of the leadership team. So they all reported to me. I had to make sure that, hold them accountable and make sure their stuff got done. So with all that in place, then Brent was freed up, and he was able to build out his sales team. He was able to put in a CRM program, and he was able to beef up their marketing program. And as a result, then he was able to get in some major new accounts and increase the sales of the business. So to me, that's the third and the most important role of the integrator, is to untrap the visionary and free him or her up to do what they do best.
Great. And we met at a company that you were at working with.
You know the guy I'm quoted, didn't you?
Oh, I didn't know it was him. Oh, okay. That's good to know. Nice guy, though. A question for Joel. Justin had mentioned he had heard about EOS traction 9 years ago, but he just relatively recently started using it 5 years ago. A company and its leaders are only able to make a change when they're ready. So how do they know if they're ready for EOS?
Sure. So I once had a surgeon tell me that the best surgeons are the ones that don't do surgery and find other ways, to make a person healthy without operating. And I'll be the first person to say that if what you are doing is working, then keep doing it. There's no reason to change. Where companies get stuck is where the true value of EOS really comes out. So we talk a lot about the concept of hitting the ceiling. And hitting the ceiling is this idea that companies grow in a period of evolution. So where organic growth, stuff's happening, and then everything that was working stops working. And we don't know why, but we've hit a ceiling and we can't break through that ceiling. Most companies, when they hit a ceiling, they either stagnate, and so they stay at that level for the rest of time, or hitting the ceiling actually kills them. And Jim Collins, who wrote Good to Great, says that more companies die of indigestion from too many opportunities than starve to death for lack of opportunities. And we see, you guys have seen that too. So when a company is in a place where everything should be, like, I've got the right people, I believe we've got a good product, we've got a good marketing team, but it doesn't all add up to something that's really working well. Mm-hmm. That's really where we're starting to look at EOS can have the hugest kind of transformation in a company.
Great. Justin, does anybody want to chime in at all? I actually don't like public speaking, you guys.
I'll ask.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, where it delivers its highest value, I've used it before. Seems to be when you're running into some real human, tough people decisions. I got to lay somebody off. I got to challenge a partner. Talk about that a little bit more, because it seems like when you start to do the analytical part, it comes across. You're writing down who does what. Yep. But when you get into the human dimension, wow, that's harder.
Sure. So the question was, let me know if I don't represent you correctly here, but there's several sides of the value of what EOS can provide. One being kind of the operations and getting everything organized, but there's also the human side, and how do we work with people and actually get the most out of our people? And is that fair?
Yep.
Okay.
From leadership.
Particularly from leadership. Okay. So I don't know how many years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, we, meaning the EOS Worldwide, so Gino Wickman and the company that I'm associated with him, did a survey of thousands of different companies that have used somebody like me to implement EOS, and essentially said why, like, why did you choose to do this? 82% of them said people. Mm-hmm. And it's very common to be in a situation where I believe that I should be getting more out of my people, and I am not getting more out of my people, and I'm not quite sure why. And so a lot of the value of EOS comes in, and it really kind of cuts through all the crap. And instead of running a company based on someone's intuition, or who's in the corner office, or who's got the biggest window, or who's yelling the loudest, or who has the most letters after their name, we run the company based on a single version of the vision. Because if you've got 5 people on your leadership team, you probably have 8 different versions of the vision. And we can only have one. But once we agree on what the vision is, getting the right people to execute the vision becomes the challenge. Creating the vision is not that difficult. And if all you want is a vision, there's other things other than EOS that can do that. But when you talk about saying, how do I align my people around actually getting this done, The part where you're aligning people and making sure that you've got the right people doing the right stuff, and Justin mentioned staying in your lane, that's a big part of it. Not that we're trying to create silos, but we're trying to create freedom from the standpoint of if Roger is accountable for payroll, then Justin doesn't have to worry about it. That doesn't mean that Justin's never going to be involved, but at the end of the day, if Justin is going to lose sleep over something, you at least lose sleep over the fact that our sales aren't on target. That's your accountability. Roger doesn't worry about that. So everybody knows what you are accountable for and worries about that specific thing. And as long as we get the right person who upholds our core values and we get them in the right seat and everybody agrees on what those accountabilities are, then magic happens, and it's really fun to see. Did I or did I not answer your question?
You're definitely within putting range.
There we go, putting range. Okay.
As a leader in the visionary, I was living Groundhog Day every day. So that's one. You're pulling your hair out constantly. You're not seeing growth. You're having issues with people. You can't do what you want to do. You go home every night upset. You're losing sleep. You're missing out with your family, your friends. You're realizing like, this is not what I started this business for. This is not what I'm in this position for. That's when you need EOS.
Good question.
I would agree with what they said about the power of the accountability chart. I had a client who I was only there a day, and I could tell they were all talking about each other's business. They were criticizing what each other were doing, and they were trying to impact what the others were doing. And I said, do you guys even have an accountability chart? And they kind of went, well, yeah. So we did it over, and everyone was clear on where their lanes were, and they stuck to it. The sniping went away, and they even started their own phrase that they would say to each other when they felt like they were getting infringed upon. They'd go, stay in your lane. And they said it in a good way, but everybody got the message.
Okay, anyone else have a question? Okay, so my question is, there's always cons and drawbacks, and obviously we're going to talk a lot about the pros here, but especially in the beginning with any new organizational change, I guess maybe Justin to start off with, before you realize any gains from a new change, what were some of the challenges and what don't you like about EOS?
I don't like anything about it. All of it. The pace was not fast enough for me, but it was too fast for my team. Putting structure into an organization that's been together for 20 years with some of the same people, we're virtual, and actually now having structured days and some structured times was very difficult for them. I actually have these. I'm going to go back to what... I think also just the amount of time it took Mark and I to connect with each other to get him up to speed so he could do what he does so well, which is just starting to take effect right now. What was the question again?
It was like a double question.
Is anybody not sure who the visionary is at this table? I'm just curious. Okay, all right.
Some ideas for you, though. So.
We,
What was the question?
Yeah. No, I think you did it. I think
Okay.
that's good now.
Ask one of these guys a question.
Did you want to add to that, Roger, or I have another
I'm
question?
staying out of this one.
Yeah.
He's staying in his lane.
Yes. So a question for you, Roger, is what are the 3 best benefits an integrator can bring to a company? I don't think we've already addressed this quite yet.
No, I don't think we did. I will also go back to my notes. I thought it was best summarized in the 3 words: focus, accountability, and alignment. I mean, think about your business and where it suffers from from a lack of any of those, and imagine that an integrator was there enforcing focus, accountability, and alignment. That's the best thing I think an integrator can do.
Okay.
I agree.
I have a question. Is there a sweet spot in terms of revenue size that you see companies typically benefit from EOS?
Great question, Dwayne.
The question was about, is there a revenue by which we can gauge the size that companies do EOS? The answer is no. I almost said I don't care about revenue. Let me back that up. Revenue is very important. Revenue is not an indicator of the size of an organization that we use. What we care about is how many people are there. And with a lot of my clients, I can tell you exactly how many people there are. I don't know off the top of my head what their revenue is. So people side, it was designed for companies with between 10 and 250 people. So certainly, can it work with less? Yes. I mean, and Justin here is an example of that, where he had to get some extra help with Mark Francis as kind of an internal integrator, but it can work with less. My biggest client has 600 people, so it works with more, but the sweet spot is really between 10 and 250 people.
Okay. Related to that question, I know you said sweet spot is 10 to 20 employees.
10 to 250.
Oh, 250 employees. When does EOS not work? That's related to it a little bit, but.
Very often, I'll meet with somebody and they'll say, well, do you have any experience in, what's your industry?
Sales and marketing.
Okay, do you have any experience with sales and marketing consulting companies? I'll be like, no. This is not about a vertical, this is about people. And so if you have people, and if you are trying to align people, and if you are willing to operate on a traditional business structure, then EOS works gloriously. I don't care what your industry is. I've been hired by a company because they like that I've got expertise in their industry. I've also been hired because somebody said, I want to work with you because you know nothing about the home building industry. Some of my clients, I could run their companies. Some of my clients, I honestly don't even really know what they're talking about sometimes. As long as you've got people, traditional business structure works great. Okay, where does that not apply? It applies in a couple situations. One is where you've got like a partner-led organization. So you've got 13 CPAs, and we all share a logo and a printer and an admin, but really we're kind of all our own little fiefdoms. That happens a lot with medical practices, with sometimes CPAs or lawyers. There are medical practices, CPAs, and lawyers who are running on EOS, but not very many of them can do that and do it well because they're not willing to operate on a traditional business structure where there's actually a person who makes the final decision, and it's not up to a vote of all 13 people, who are partners. The other place where it does not work is if you are not truly willing to be open and honest and vulnerable. And if you ask the question, are you willing to be open and honest and vulnerable, there's a very obvious right answer. Like it's Sunday school, what's the right answer? The answer is Jesus, right? Okay. So if you're asked, are you willing to be open and honest and vulnerable, what's the right answer?
Yes.
Yes, that's the right answer. When you actually start pushing people and you identify that there's something that's not working here and you say, what was going on with that look? And you obviously, there's something going on between you two, let's talk about that. And you start pushing on those things, some people just shut down and they can't handle it. And they aren't willing to go through the pain in order to have all the benefit to their organization. And when that's the case, then we part ways. If you're not truly willing to be open, honest, and vulnerable, then don't even try.
If I could, just real quick, follow-up question, and I'm Dwayne, my name's Stuart. Worked in corporate America. Why does it tap out at 250? Why is that the magic number?
Do you want me to do that now?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so Dwayne says, why does it tap out at Dwayne, right? Okay, D-U-A-N-E? Okay, it helps me remember if I know the spellings. They're so good. This is the visionary who's just asking about the other ways to pronounce Dwayne and spell it. So let's be clear. I'm going to have a little bit of a visionary moment. If everybody was like Justin, we would have amazing things that get halfway done and lots of phenomenal back and forth, whiplash in companies, and they would fumble along, and it would be amazing, but they'd always be fumbling. If everybody was like Roger, you would have the most amazing, perfect 10% growth every year, and it would be the most consistent thing that you've ever seen in your life, but nothing really new and different and groundbreaking is ever going to happen, because that's not Roger's gift. Roger's gift is taking a guy like this and saying, okay, well, I'm going to actually make this happen for you. So sometimes there can be an ethic of, well, the integrators are the good people or the visionaries are the good people. Guys, we need both of these people in a company in order for it to really succeed. Now, my visionary moment, what was the question I was supposed to be answering? Oh, 250 people.
Yes.
Okay, so 250 people. Dwayne said, why does it tap out at 250 people? And the answer is it doesn't. The biggest company that I'm aware of that's running on EOS is 6,500 employees, publicly traded. So can it work with very big companies? Yes. Where it starts to get a little bit messy at times is in bigger companies tend to want to have cross-functional teams and dotted line relationships and things like that, and that does not work in EOS. The other thing that starts to happen is everything we do in EOS is a 90-day world. So it starts with the leadership team here, and then it ends 90 days, and then we do another 90 days. And then if I'm going to give my people direction, then they're getting direction on the second day, and then all their stuff that they're going to have due is due on day 88, and if they're going to roll it down through their people, now all those people are hearing about it on day 6, and their stuff has to be due on day 85, and so you get enough layers, and there's not enough time, there's not enough calendar days to really roll that out the way that it's intended with EOS. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay.
I want to add to the vulnerability, absolutely. What I found out as the leader and running the business for 20 years, that I had 8 people come in now, and I had to be open and listen to them tell me how to run the business differently and what we've been doing wrong all this time, and not pounce and tell them that that's how it's going to be, that's how it has been, but to actually just sit back and listen, and then work together to uncover really, or peel that onion, that issue back a little bit further, and actually then learn from each other a better way to do things. So it won't work if the company's not ready for major disruption in your organization. So they have to be ready for some serious change.
I would go back to Dwayne's question too, and as a company gets bigger, there are other tools. I'm familiar with Gazelles, the Rockefeller habits. That's a very sophisticated operating system that applies to much larger companies. So I would.
There's another one called it's 4DX. What does that stand for? 4 disciplines of execution. So the most important thing, I'm just going to check and make sure Gino Wickman isn't here, okay? Okay, so the most important thing is not that you run your company on EOS. The most important thing is that you run your company on one thing. And so if you are bigger, you could consider Rockefeller habits, you could consider the 4DX, and some of those, there's other systems like EOS that are geared toward bigger companies. Pick one thing, run your entire company on one thing. That's what's most important.
A question over there, go
But
ahead.
EOS is the best, of course.
How do you think this would work for professional sports teams like football, baseball, or basketball? This is
I can answer what you guys
Oh, you go ahead.
It's clarity and purpose. It's like driving that team together. The coach is the integrator. You need the players. The coach has to be getting all those players moving and in the same direction.
Similar to like a professional services thing, if you aren't in a structure where you're willing to fire one of your 13 partners because he or she doesn't GWC the seat, then it's not going to work. And I don't have all that much experience with professional sports teams, but I was at a chiropractor one time, and the chiropractor was the guy who worked with the Minnesota Vikings. And I asked him, what are the players like? Do you enjoy working with them? And he said, oh yeah, love working with the players. I've never had any problems at all with any football player. And he goes, except for Randy Moss. Man, that guy was a dickhead. And if you follow Randy Moss's career, he basically goes, amazing athlete, goes somewhere until people are just so sick of him that they get rid of him. Then he goes somewhere else until they get sick of it, so sick that they can't deal with him anymore. So in EOS, if it's going to work, you can't keep people until you absolutely cannot stand them anymore before you let go of them. So professional sports teams with 5-year contracts, I'm not optimistic.
Go ahead, Mark.
On this point about sports teams, I heard a presentation many months ago by the gentleman who's the CEO of Minnesota United, the soccer team. He was applying a lot of these principles in the building of his organization, in the marketing of the team, in the whole issue of values for every employee. He did the final interview for every employee, regardless of level or position, because they felt that being aligned on their values was going to make them successful. Now, you know, running the sports part of it is probably a little bit different, but he was absolutely applying these principles to the way they were creating a company from scratch, building a facility, and doing a variety of other things.
U.S. and soccer is an oxymoron.
The other football.
Go ahead.
The reason for asking that is I kind of don't understand how you have a coach for the quarterbacks, you have a different coach for the alternate quarterback or backup quarterback. And I think, how are these people, on the same page?
So your question is about with sports teams, with when they've got a coach for this person, a coach for this person, a coach for this person? Okay, one of the rules in EOS is we don't speak from theory, we only speak from experience. I have never run a professional sports team. Have you? No?
No, I don't think I have either.
I don't know. We could theorize, but I don't know.
Oh,
You ran the clam ice fishing team. What are you talking about?
Yes, Roger, clam ice fishing team. So how did you deal with the coaches in that one, Roger?
no. All right. I don't think we have touched on this too much, but maybe to expand a little more, Roger, what does it take to make a successful visionary and integrator relationship? I think that's, there's some rules around that.
Yes, and they're in this book. So there's another book. We don't have it for you today, but we do have traction for you. But there's another book called Rocket Fuel, and it's a kind of a companion book, and it lays out all about the visionary integrator relationship. And I pulled the points out of here, what it says to make a great visionary integrator relationship, and there are 5 rules. First is that the two have to stay on the same page all the time. You heard that from Justin, that he and Mark have to stay on the same page all the time. Even if they don't agree, he has to keep quiet until the two of them can get alone together so they can work it out. No end runs. So if people go to Mark for an answer and they don't like the answer, they can't go to Justin and have Justin cut Mark off at the knees. You can't run to mom if dad gives you the bad answer, right? You gotta follow the rules. Another rule is the integrator is the tiebreaker. So if the leadership team has an even number and there's a tie, the integrator casts the winning vote. This is a tricky one, that when you were working in the business, Justin is an employee, not the owner. The owner is separate, so Justin is an employee. I've actually had cases where I've been the integrator and the owner is the visionary. Yes, he's up here, but he also sits in the sales box. So he actually reported to me as an employee, and I reported to him as the visionary. So you have to keep that relationship clear. And the 5th one is that the two maintain mutual respect for each other, that they have to respect each other, and it has to be clear to the staff that they do.
Great. We're just about at 1 o'clock here, so I'd love to just get some parting words, whatever we may have missed, or just as we leave the audience here. Anybody?
Okay. So I think the integrator is the greatest job in the world. It takes a long time to get the right background for it, but when you get the right relationship and the right opportunity, it really works well. As I said, I'm doing it fractionally now. That way I get to work with lots of companies. But I also talked about the fit is being very difficult. It's very difficult to find the right fit, like it seems like Justin and Mark have. So what I've gotten together with 4 people, or 3 other people, Mark and Suzanne and I, and a woman named Barb Voorhees, and the 4 of us market ourselves together as Visionary Integrator Solutions, because it's very likely one of us might not be the right fit for someone, but we market each other together, and that's how we promote ourselves.
What was the question? Just kidding.
Good one. I almost fell for that.
Yes, no, I know that. It's a joke, Roger. No, I have forgot my answer. This is really bad. Be ready for disruption, and everyone should really read the book and look into it. It is really beneficial, small or large, and I can't wait for Q2. I can't wait for Q2 results.
Awesome. When I do these kinds of speaking things, in a group this size, there's very often issues of confidentiality, sometimes competitors in the room. And so one of the things we want to do is make sure that you all had our information. So inside the traction books, you'll see the contact information for all three of us. If you have questions that for whatever reason are not appropriate to bring up here, feel free to reach out to us. And no sales, I promise we won't, like, we're not selling an obligation. We just want to make sure that you guys get the information that you needed out of this. And so feel free to follow up with one of us, and we can get that, get your questions answered. And then the other thing is that we, very much by design, did not want to try to do an educational thing about EOS. Like, this is how the 6 key components fit together, blah, blah, blah. There's lots of opportunities for that. If that is something that you want, then feel free to let me know, and I can figure out with myself or these guys how we can get you actual education on it beyond just the high-level stuff we did today.
Thank you so much. We do not have enough books for everybody about, I don't know, do we have enough? Because a lot of people registered in the last 2 days. So if you didn't get one, please let us know and we'll get you one. And
Roger has a few more here.
Okay, you guys are good.
But if you did not get one, then let us know and we will make sure that you get a book.
Thank you everyone for coming, and we'll see you back here May 17th for Does Culture Eat strategy for breakfast.